Paris, the city of light. Spring of 1925. The air is thick with the scent of fresh bread, coffee, and the heady promise of the jazz age. The Great War is a fading nightmare, and the roaring 20s are in full swing. In the shadows of this glittering city, a man sits in a plush hotel suite, sipping a glass of fine Bordeaux. He is impeccably dressed, his manners are flawless, and his mind is a labyrinth of deceit. His name is Victor Lustig, and he is reading a newspaper article that will inspire one of the most audacious cons in human history. The article is a short, almost whimsical piece buried in the back pages. It complains about the exorbitant cost of maintaining the Eiffel Tower. The paint is chipping. The ironwork requires constant care. It's a financial millstone around the city's neck. Most readers would nod sympathetically and turn the page, but Victor Lustig is not most readers. He sees not a problem, but an opportunity. A grand, magnificent, almost unthinkable opportunity. He finishes his wine, a slow, calculated smile spreading across his face. He folds the newspaper neatly, his mind already weaving a web of breathtaking complexity. He has decided to sell the Eiffel Tower, and he's not just going to do it once. He's going to do it twice. This is the story of the man who pulled off the impossible. A story of charm, audacity, and a chilling understanding of the one weakness every mark possesses: greed. Music swells and then transitions to a more investigative, narrative tone. Part 1. The making of a monster. To understand how someone could even conceive of selling a national monument, we must first understand Victor Lustig. He wasn't a common thug. He was a master of his dark art, and his education began early. He was born Robert V. Miller in 1890 in what is now the Czech Republic, to a respectable, middle-class family. By all accounts, he was bright, charming, and multilingual, speaking several European languages with ease. He had an air of aristocracy about him, even as a young man. But beneath that polished veneer was a profound aversion to hard work and a fascination with the easy score. His first forays into crime were small-time cheating at card games, running petty street cons. But Victor was a quick study. He learned that the key to a successful con was not force, but psychology. He studied the works of a notorious French swindler and wrote his own 10 Commandments for con men, a list that included gems like: be a patient listener, never look bored, wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them, never boast, just let your importance be quietly obvious, never drink when you're working, and perhaps most importantly, the promising of something for nothing is the conman's stock in trade. He drifted across Europe, leaving a trail of duped marks under a dozen different aliases. He was Count Victor Lustig, a title he bestowed upon himself because it commanded immediate respect. He used a device he called the Romanian Money Box, a cleverly crafted chest that he claimed could duplicate $100 bills. He would demonstrate it. The mark would see it work with their own eyes, and they would pay a fortune for the box. Of course, it was a simple sleight of hand. The machine only ever produced one real bill that Lustig had secretly loaded inside. The secret wasn't technology. It was the victim's own desperate desire to believe in magic. By the time he arrived in Paris, Victor Lustig was a seasoned predator. He had honed his persona to perfection. He looked the part of a wealthy, disillusioned Austrian aristocrat. He stayed in the best hotels, wore tailored suits, and frequented the most exclusive circles. He was a ghost in the machine of high society, and he was ready for his masterpiece. Part 2. The setup, a gathering of vultures. The con began with meticulous planning. Lustig needed to make his approach believable. He couldn't just walk up to someone on the street and offer them the Eiffel Tower. He needed to target the right kind of person. Wealthy, ambitious, and with a reputation just shady enough to believe the French government would conduct its business in the shadows. He and his partner, an American con man named Dapper Dan Collins, who posed as his secretary, went to the main Parisian library and studied the city's list of licensed scrap metal dealers. They weren't looking for the most honest, they were looking for the most greedy. They needed men who saw the world not in terms of beauty or history, but in tons of iron and francs per kilogram. They identified 5 or 6 candidates. Then Lustig took his most audacious step. Using his count persona, he had official-looking government stationery forged. He then sent out beautifully typed, embossed letters to his selected targets. The letters were masterpieces of bureaucratic intrigue. They were invitations to a top-secret, off-the-books meeting at the Hotel de Crillon, one of Paris's most luxurious hotels. Situated on the Place de la Concorde, a stone's throw from government ministries, the subject was a matter of great discretion and national importance. Imagine receiving such a letter. The expensive paper, the official-sounding language, the prestigious location. It screamed legitimacy. One by one, the scrap dealers arrived at the hotel, their curiosity piqued, their ambition buzzing. They were ushered into a private meeting room where they were met by Count Lustig. He was the picture of a harried, high-level government official. He was flanked by Dapper Dan Collins, who sat silently, taking notes, the very image of a dutiful functionary. Lustig greeted them with a grave demeanor. He spoke in hushed, confidential tones. Lustig, as imagined, "Gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice, and with such discretion. The matter I am about to discuss is one of the most sensitive the Republic has faced in peacetime. What you hear in this room must not leave it. You have been selected for your expertise and your discretion." He would let the silence hang, allowing the weight of the moment to settle on the dealers. Then he would drop the bombshell. Part 3. The pitch, a monumental lie. He began by confirming what they all knew from the newspapers. The Eiffel Tower was a financial disaster. The cost of repainting it alone was staggering. It was rusting. It was outdated, and the government had been debating its future for years. Then he delivered the killer blow. Lustig. After much deliberation at the highest levels, a secret committee has reached a decision that, for obvious reasons of public sentiment, cannot be made public. The Eiffel Tower is to be demolished and sold for scrap. He would let the gasps subside. He would talk about the public outcry, the romantic attachment Parisians had to the structure, the potential for political upheaval. That, he explained, was why this meeting was happening in secret. The government needed to dispose of the 7,000 tons of iron quickly, quietly, and with a minimum of fuss. The deal had to be done before the public found out, and protests could be organized to sell this lie. Lustig didn't just rely on words. He understood that belief requires evidence. After his shocking presentation, he announced, "But gentlemen, do not take my word for it. Let us see the subject of our discussion for ourselves." He then led the group of wide-eyed businessmen on a private, official-looking tour of the Eiffel Tower. He pointed out areas of structural weakness and excessive rust. He spoke with authority about load-bearing stresses and metallurgical fatigue. He answered their technical questions with confident, fabricated jargon. He was showing them the crime scene, making them complicit in the secret. During this tour, Lustig was performing a delicate psychological ballet. He was watching the dealers, looking for his mark. He needed the one who was the most avaricious, the one whose eyes gleamed not at the beauty of the tower, but at the fortune it represented in scrap iron. He found him in André Poisson. Poisson was a man who felt he was on the outside looking in. He was wealthy, but not part of the Parisian elite. He was desperate for the status and recognition that a deal of this magnitude would bring. Lustig sensed this insecurity. It was the perfect lever. Part 4. The hook, line, and sinker playing Poisson after the tour, the dealers returned to their businesses, their minds reeling. A few days later, André Poisson received a phone call. It was the Count. He informed Poisson that his bid had been looked upon most favorably. The government had chosen him. He was to be the new owner of the Eiffel Tower. Poisson was elated. This was his ticket to the big leagues. But Lustig wasn't finished. He now began the second phase of the con, one designed to exploit Poisson's insecurity. He arranged a final meeting to iron out the details. At this meeting, Lustig was different. He was nervous, agitated. He hinted at difficulties. He mentioned powerful ministers who were asking uncomfortable questions, who might need persuading. This was the bribe ploy, a classic component of many cons. Lustig was presenting himself not just as a corrupt official, but as a partner in crime. He was testing Poisson's resolve and deepening his investment, both financially and psychologically. By asking for a bribe, he was making the deal feel even more real. In the shadowy world of government contracts, backroom deals and bribes were, and often still are, part of the game. To Poisson, this wasn't a red flag. It was a green light confirming he was dealing with the real thing. Poisson, desperate not to lose the deal of a lifetime, quickly agreed. He not only paid the bribe, but also the first installment for the tower itself, a sum that would be millions in today's dollars. Victor Lustig and Dapper Dan Collins took the money, shook Poisson's hand, wished him well with the dismantling process, and promptly vanished. Part 5. The aftermath, a stunning silence now. Here is where the story defies all logic. What would you do if you had just been swindled out of a fortune? You would go to the police, right? You would scream from the rooftops. But André Poisson did not. He was trapped. To go to the police would be to admit his own monumental greed and stupidity. He would become the laughingstock of France, the man who thought he could buy the Eiffel Tower. The humiliation was a prison of his own making. He kept his mouth shut, hoping the whole thing would just go away. Back in their hideout, Lustig and Collins counted the money. They couldn't believe it. The con had worked flawlessly. They waited tensely for the police to kick down the door. Days turned into weeks. Nothing. The newspapers were silent. There was no manhunt. The sheer audacity of the crime had created its own perfect cover. No one could believe it had happened, so no one reported it. And this is where a lesser criminal would have retired. But Victor Lustig was not a lesser criminal. He saw Poisson's silence not as a lucky break, but as a market indicator. The con was perfect. The system had no defenses against it, so after a few months, when the heat never materialized, he made a decision. He would do it again. Part 6. The second act, a lesson in hubris. Several months later, Lustig and Collins returned to Paris. They set up the same operation, the same forged stationery, the same secret meeting at the Hotel de Crillon, the same story about the tower being a financial burden. They even targeted the same type of scrap metal dealer. But this time, something was different. They had grown overconfident. The script was the same, but the magic wasn't quite as potent. When they gathered their new group of potential buyers, one of the dealers grew suspicious. The story was just a little too good to be true. Perhaps he had heard a whisper, a rumor of a similar scheme months earlier. Before Lustig could even identify his mark, this dealer went to the police. The Parisian police were understandably incredulous. Someone was trying to sell the Eiffel Tower. It was preposterous, but the dealer was insistent. The police decided to investigate, just to be thorough. A sharp-eyed investigator managed to get a description of the Count and his secretary. The game was up. Lustig and Collins got wind of the investigation, likely through a tip-top hotel employee, and had to flee Paris in the middle of the night, leaving behind their luxurious lifestyle and nearly getting caught. The second sale had failed. fact that they had even attempted it and nearly succeeded a second time speaks to the breathtaking arrogance of Victor Lustig. Part 7, The Final Con, and the unraveling with the European authorities now aware of his scheme. Lustig fled to the United States. He was far from finished. In America, he teamed up with a brilliant but psychotic chemist and con man named Tom Shaw. Together, they perfected the Romanian Money Box, scam on a grand scale, swindling a string of wealthy Americans. But Lustig's luck was running out. The world was getting smaller, and law enforcement was getting more sophisticated. His old partner, Dapper Dan Collins, was arrested on an unrelated charge, and in a fit of pique, decided to talk to the authorities. He sang like a canary about the Eiffel Tower scheme and Lustig's other crimes. More importantly, Lustig made a fatal mistake. He tried to con the wrong man, the notoriously ruthless mob boss, Al Capone. Lustig approached Capone with a proposition. He claimed he could turn $50,000 into $100,000 in 2 months through a complex stock deal. Capone, intrigued, gave him the money. Lustig had no intention of investing it. He simply rented a safe deposit box and waited. After 2 months, he went back to Capone, looking dejected. Lustig to Capone, "I'm sorry, Mr. Capone. The deal fell through. It was a failure. Here is your $50,000 back." But then he handed Capone the full $50,000. This was a stroke of genius. He was betting that Capone would be so impressed by his honesty that he would reward him. He was right. Capone, who was used to being lied to and cheated, was so taken by this apparent display of integrity that he gave Lustig $5,000 for his troubles. It was a brilliant short-term con, but in the long run, you do not want to be on Al Capone's radar. When Capone later found out he had been played, he was furious. A contract was allegedly put on Lustig's life, forcing him into even deeper hiding. The end came in 1935. Lustig was finally tracked down and arrested by a determined U.S. Treasury agent. His legend had grown so much that when he was captured, he was found in a flophouse, but still impeccably dressed, with a key to a storage locker that contained the final tools of his trade, the forged government documents for the Eiffel Tower sale. He was tried and convicted. The man who had outwitted governments and millionaires was finally brought low. He was sent to the notorious federal prison on Alcatraz Island. Prison broke him. The master of deception, the man who lived by his wits and charm, was reduced to a number. He died of pneumonia in his cell on March 11, 1947. A forgotten inmate. The world only learned the full extent of his incredible story later. Part 8. The Legacy. Why the con worked so. How did he do it? How did Victor Lustig manage to sell the most famous landmark in the world? It wasn't just about forged documents and a good story. It was a masterclass in human psychology. First, plausibility. The Eiffel Tower was controversial when it was built. Many Parisians hated it. It was expensive to maintain. The seed of truth made the lie grow. Second, exclusivity. The secret meeting, the forged credentials, the hushed tones, it all made the targets feel chosen, special. They were being let in on a secret of state. This flattered their ego and clouded their judgment. Third, greed. This is the engine of every great con. The dealers weren't thinking about the Eiffel Tower as a monument. They saw 7,000 tons of scrap iron. Their avarice blinded them to the obvious. Fourth, authority. Lustig looked, acted, and sounded like a powerful government official. He understood that people are hardwired to obey authority figures, especially when they are confirming our own secret desires. And fifth, the victim's complicity. By asking for a bribe, Lustig made Poisson an accomplice. To report the crime would be to admit his own corruption. The shame and humiliation were a more effective prison than any jail. Victor Lustig was a parasite, but he was a brilliant one. He didn't steal with a gun, he stole with a smile and a handshake. He understood that the most valuable currency isn't money, it's trust. And the most powerful weapon isn't a bullet, it's a well-told story. He proved that the most incredible lies are not those we are told, but those we are desperate to believe. André Poisson didn't just buy the Eiffel Tower, he bought a dream of status and wealth that was far more valuable and far more fragile than iron. Victor Lustig's story is a dark fairy tale from the Jazz Age, a reminder that sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, and that the greatest monuments are not just made of iron and steel, but of ambition, greed, and the audacious lies that bind them together. Outro music begins to fade in narrator. So the next time you see a picture of the Eiffel Tower sparkling against the Parisian sky, remember that it stands not only as a symbol of engineering and romance, but also as a testament to one of the most brazen confidence tricks ever perpetrated, a reminder that the most dangerous traps are not the ones we see, but the ones we walk into with our eyes wide open, led by our own desires. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this historical deep dive, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what other incredible true stories you'd like me to cover next. Until next time.